why am I walking around in the Fluted Knight set from none other than Demon Souls? Well, to answer that, we have to rewind a bit. But it does look pretty awesome, right? I've always loved the Fluted Knight set. It's so sick. But we have to rewind just a second. First, we start in the Dark Souls Remastered folder. I was looking around in the character folder, or CHR, because I was looking around and basically I was looking for the giant in Anor Londo. That's where all the enemies are stored, their animations, commonly their textures as well are stored in their TPF files, and you can also find like their fiber files, so their models. Anyway, I was surfing through and I noticed a C9990. I was like, okay, that's weird. That seems like a weird number. I don't know. That's high up there. So, you know, for the fun of it, I was like, okay, let's open that. So I ended up yabbering it to open it. And then I pop in. I was like, okay, all right, C9990. And I ended up opening up the actual fiber. What model is this? And it was none other than the Fluted Knight. And so then I was like, okay, so this must be the debug character from Demon Souls. Because when you use the debug menu, as I do in Demon Souls, it always defaults to the Fluted Knight with this shield, with that sword. And I was like, okay, that's interesting. Okay, all right. And then I was like, well, let me check Prepare to Die edition. Is it there as well? So I went into character and I was like, all right, let me surf down here. And it was not. It is not in the Prepare to Die edition. So that was another little wrinkle to it where I'm like, well, that's super interesting. So Q-Lock apparently kept this in, or, well, not even that. They must have gotten new source files, or an older version, obviously. Like, they weren't basing theirs on the Prepare to Die edition, presumably, or something like that. They must have gotten extra files, or debug files, early versions of files or something. And so this opened up another interesting wrinkle, and then I'm like, okay, so the debug character, I remember that, I see that. I then opened the textures, because I was like, okay, did they do anything to the textures? Because this character isn't in the game, right? Like, the Fluted Knight is just not in Dark Souls 1. And so I started opening the textures, and I noticed that, okay, we have the standard, you have the standard textures, you know, your albedo texture. Looks fine, looks normal, looks like I compared it, well, actually I didn't compare it to the Demon Souls one, but in terms of resolution, it fits. It's 1K resolution. And then I went back, and I noticed, yeah, the albedos look normal. And then I was looking at the normal map, and what I found interesting is they had actually updated the normal maps to the format that DSR uses, which is BC5. That's why it looked yellowish. And the standard normal maps for Prepare to Die look blue, because that's the standard format for, like, they use BC1, whole bunch of things. Basically, you can tell a DSR normal map very quickly by the normal map, in that they use that format. And then we go back a little bit, and the other thing I noticed is you clicked into the specular maps. They had not updated the specular maps. So these are basically Prepare to Die edition versions, where the specular maps for remastered look so different. And I can actually show that, I think, pretty easily with this. So this is what a DSR, Dark Souls Remastered specular map, generally looks like, in that they use red for, like, non-metallic. They use the orange is like leather-ish, and then this green color they can use for metallic, and then they can kind of go in between that for different things. And so they all denote certain, like, material properties. And then you have, like, the Prepare to Die specular maps, or sort of like the classic ones, and they just look like this. And so in game, when I first loaded the Fluted Knight set, which I'll explain how I loaded that in the game, it was very shiny because the specular maps were, well, old, right? Like they were not the correct format. And I did remember that there was a mod for DSR by the amazing Meowmeritus. I'm probably not saying that correctly, but they had made a mod that actually does put the Fluted Knight set in the game. So I did download that, and that's actually what I'm using. So there is a Prepare to Die edition version. Oh, that's nice. I didn't notice that. But yeah, so they put it in the game, which is great, but the specular map was still incorrect, more so. Like it works, but it was too shiny. And so what you're seeing here, let me go up. Actually, no, let's stay in here. So what you're seeing here is I have modified the normal maps. I generated my own using the originals as part of it, but then generating new ones based on the upscaled albedo textures. And so yeah, I also went 2x resolution on all the textures of the set here. And so now you have like this pretty nice metallic effect, because I had to manually go into the specular maps and choose certain things to be more metallic than others, and have the leather not reflect as much as like on the leggings, you can see that really well. They have those little portions that have a little bit of metallic, but then the rest of it is leather. And so that's how you can see they are reacting differently to the lighting. I think there's a little bit of it. Oh yeah, I still need to fix part of it. You can see there's a little bit, it looked like I spilled something on my jeans back here. So on the back side, you can see there's still a portion that is actually reflecting like metallic materials. And but yeah, so I updated all that, and it looks really cool. But I noticed there was that mod. But this makes me think, this is sort of like the whole kind of reason for this video, other than just to show off the Fluted Knight is fucking cool in Dark Souls 1. But what it makes me think is that Q-Lock, we know the remaster was pretty half-baked and remains so in its unmodded format. And we've wondered why. And I think this is actually a piece of the puzzle. So the fact that this armor set made it into the game for no particular reason, wasn't in Prepare to Die, and then the normal maps were altered. So to me, that makes me think they had an automated bulk processing program or some sort that they were using to upgrade the normal maps. And unfortunately, it created issues in some cases. Sometimes the normal maps were just generally better, but sometimes they were not. And so this makes me think they were potentially using more of these bulk programs for various things to upgrade, in air quotes, and process different things to change it over to their new rendering setup that they made for DSR. So I think that could explain a lot of the issues that we saw. For sure, IMO. But that's kind of where I'm at. But it also shows, it's another thing that I've always found curious, in that if you go to the Dark Souls Remastered folder here, you'll notice all of the folders are just completely on their own and unpacked. And what's weird about this is how it comes by default. You just have all these folders sitting out here. And so for those uninitiated, for Dark Souls 3, Elden Ring, Dark Souls 2, Sekiro, every other From Software game after this, well, hell, even Demon Souls, you have to unpack the game by using an unpacking program that the modders have created to basically have all of these folders laid out like this. And yet, Dark Souls Remastered, I think it's overlooked a lot, comes in that format. There's just folders sitting places. That's highly unusual. So I do think that Dark Souls Remastered I would love to know the development behind it, because I assume that they were not given a lot of time, they were not given a lot of money, and then the issues that we found were never fixed, right? Like the lighting issues, certain normal maps were flipped, things that were caused by the remaster were just never patched or fixed or talked about ever again. And so that makes me think that Q-Lock essentially had a certain job to do They did it in the timeline they wanted, and then they were kicked off. And so that's my, I don't know this, but by looking at the files and having modded DS1, specifically Dark Souls Remastered, for hundreds of hours at this point, it definitely makes me think that, because it's almost like you're looking at a crime scene, which it's not that serious, but looking at the files and digging into the different like BNDs, BDT files, and textures, you're basically seeing the evidence of what originally happened, and you're basically being able to piece it back together in a forensic way. And so as I've been doing this, I keep noticing things where I'm like, okay, that looks weird. That's interesting. But this is one where I think it's a good example of their process was potentially why they would be able to overlook glaring issues, is if you were doing it in bulk and you weren't going, you know, one by one. And that's the thing, like, it's a shame too, is that like I'm going through the textures one by one, generating new normal maps, looking at the albedo texture, comparing it to Prepare to Die, see which one is better, see if the normal map is better, see if the original albedo got upscaled, which it rarely ever did. Like Remastered, I've only seen like 1% of cases where the texture is higher resolution in Remastered than it was for Prepare to Die. It's so rare, but it has happened. So anyway, thought that was interesting. Hopefully you enjoyed this video, and if you did, a sub to the channel would be greatly appreciated, because I post pretty much every other day, sometimes not, depends. And liking the video helps a lot, and sharing it as well. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.